Hello, everybody, and welcome into Commodity Culture, where we break down commodities markets, sound money principles, and geopolitics, all with the goal of making you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day. Today is January 19th, 2026, and I'm thrilled to welcome Alex Krainer to the program, a geopolitical analyst, author, hedge fund manager, and the creator of System Trend Following. Alex believes the chaos being spread by the Trump administration as they kidnap Maduro and set their sights on Greenland has a hidden agenda behind it that involves a secret collaboration with Russia and China. This could see the geopolitical chessboard completely upended and rearranged in favor of a new global power structure, and Alex dives into the players of this game and who stands to benefit when the dust finally settles. And you're going to want to stick around to the end of the interview where Alex breaks down why the British government and MI6 could be involved in funding the 9/11 terror attacks. If you love silver, pick up your Commodity Culture Stack Silver, Not Fiat t-shirt using the link in the description below. And now, my friends, strap yourselves in for my conversation with Alex Krainer. Alex Krainer, it is great to have you back on Commodity Culture. I want to start with a 60,000-foot overview of the current geopolitical chessboard and have you try to make some sense of it for us. Now, Trump abducts Maduro and is now targeting Greenland. China and Canada do a trade deal, and now Mark Carney is talking about defending Greenland if necessary. The Russia-Ukraine conflict continues, with Russia clearly in the driver's seat, leading EU leadership to declare that they need to prepare to go to war. Meanwhile, Israel continues its genocide in Gaza and by many accounts has been actively involved in stirring up violence in protests in Iran, which the US was supposedly about to strike but decided not to at the last moment. Unravel all of this for us. What games are these different actors playing, and who do you expect the winners and losers to be once the dust settles?
I'm not sure where to start, but I'll start again with George Soros. In May 2022, he told us that what we're experiencing in the world is a conflict between two systems of governance. And I would say that it's probably one system of governance versus everybody else, which is the European oligarchic, neo-colonial, imperialist system of governance against everybody else. So I think that's the 60,000-foot view of what's actually going on. And then Trump has been in power for about a year now, just about. And before he even was inaugurated, on the 15th January of last year, Marco Rubio was being grilled in front of the Senate for his confirmation hearings. And on that occasion, he said a number of very important things, namely that Trump administration considers the post-World War II global order more than obsolete, that it has indeed been weaponized against the United States, and that the new reality are multipolar integrations. Now, at that point, it was very hard to say whether Rubio meant this, but my guess was that he wouldn't have said it if he didn't mean it, because, you know, in U.S. politics, it's easy enough to continue to go along with the same policy as before. You know, we are the hegemon, everybody else has to submit, and that's how it's going to be. So you wouldn't announce a radical departure from that policy unless you actually meant it. And so for the past 12 months, I've been observing events very closely, and I've been trying very hard to understand what's going on. And my impression is that Trump is actually delivering on all that. Namely, he's pretty much demolishing the post-World War II global order, you know, the rules-based global order, as they like to call it. And he has been working in favor of multipolar integrations. None of that is very obvious. And I think that the reason why none of this is very obvious is because after 60 years, no, after 80 years since World War II, we've been all inured to a certain mindset. And, some of the constants of these 80 years is that Russia and China are rivals. Russia indeed is an enemy, always has been, right? That's practically the constant of the global landscape as people recognize it. At the same time, the Europeans are our allies. The British, special relationship, very close friends. The French, the Germans, the Italians, all of these are our allies. When I say our, I'm not American. I'm just saying from the point of view of the American officialdom, diplomats, military personnel, CIA, the academic and think tank world, all of that. And then, we have this undying devotion to the state of Israel, which is completely irrational and sentimental, but we don't question it. It just is at all cost. It doesn't matter, what the consequences might be. That just stays. We dominate Eurasian landmass. We kind of ignore our own neighborhood for the most part. And we are working hard together, covertly together with the MI6 and the British on subjugating and colonizing Africa. That's how it was. And now over the last year, we see that Trump has upended practically all of that. We see that, first of all, almost just a few weeks into his presidency, he picked up the phone and called up Vladimir Putin, which is extremely important because the relationship between Russia and the United States is far and away the greatest factor of the future of peace for humanity. These are two nuclear superpowers, and whether they can cooperate and coordinate their policy in a constructive and friendly way, or whether they are just enemies with no communications, is a massively important fact. And so the fact that Trump did that is a hugely positive development. Things in the Middle East are very, very touchy because that's one of the constants of the United States internal politics, the support for Israel. And there you have a very powerful segment of the voters, which is the Zionist Jews and the evangelical Christians. And they are all extremely passionate supporters of Israel. And they're also a very large voter bloc. I think my understanding is that we're talking about between 60 and 80 million people who fall into this category. And then we also know that a lot of these Zionist Jews are also very wealthy political donors, very wealthy and very active. So Trump facing next year's pivotal midterm elections has to navigate this very carefully. The situation is festering a little bit, but, well, it's not festering a little bit, it's festering in the worst imaginable way. But Trump has attempted to bring peace to the Palestinian people. They're still getting killed on a daily basis, but less than before the peace. So, it's a relative positive. And now, latest news just dropped. Trump invited Vladimir Putin to the Board of Peace for Palestine, which is a very, very good sign, which is a very hopeful sign. Ukraine, that conflict, Trump sidestepped it. because when his administration started last year, February, March, there was a lot of back and forth between the European powers and the United States and Zelensky. Remember Zelensky traveling back and forth, and the Europeans, and then Zelensky going to the United States and then running back for hugs and safe space to London and Paris. The key element in all those discussions was the United States providing a security guarantee for Ukraine. That was the most important thing that the Zelensky and the Europeans wanted to obtain from Trump. Why? Because if the United States gave a credible security guarantee to Ukraine, that would mean that Britain, France, Germany could send troops into Ukraine, and these would be kind of tripwire troops, because they would be small. There would be 10, 20, 30,000 troops tops. The only purpose they would serve there is to trigger the American entry into the war. So the troops go into Ukraine, the Russians attack them, and then, London, Paris, Berlin, they say, oh, look, what the Russians did to us. Now you have to deliver on your security guarantee. And then the United States is in that war, and you get collective conflict between Russia and the collective West. So pretty much a World War III scenario, and Trump completely extricated the United States from that and said, not interested, you're on your own. Venezuela, the most confusing part, in addition to Argentina, I have to say, that I had a very, very hard time understanding Trump's gambit there, because it was extremely risky, and I didn't understand for the longest time why. I still don't understand, but I'll share an educated guess about that. So, 2nd January of this year, Trump sends his troops, Delta Force, to abduct Nicolas Maduro and bring him to trial to the United States. Everything about that affair is extremely strange, and extremely unlikely. But it's not just what happened, it's also what didn't happen, because, if it were, let's say, if it were strictly about drugs trafficking, it doesn't make sense, because in that case, your suspect number one are the money laundering banks, which are principally United States, Canada, and these European banks in the offshore centers in the Caribbean. Your suspect number two would probably be Ecuador, number three, Mexico, number four, Canada. And then Venezuela, if it features in that list at all, is somewhere way down after Colombia and some other nations. So that didn't make sense. The second thing that didn't make sense is the oil. Because if you wanted the oil, Maduro was already giving it. Maduro was already saying, here, set your terms, we'll do a deal. And so you could have done that. The United States is far and away the most powerful nation in that hemisphere, right? And the biggest market. And they could have said, we're going to buy all your oil, and we're going to set the terms. We're going to set the price. And Maduro's government would have said, yeah, okay, fine. That's a deal. So why risk a horrible mishap? If Venezuelans responded, if they managed to shoot down any of those helicopters, I think 8 of them went on the mission. If they fired an anti-ship rocket at any of the American vessels in the region and sunk a ship with hundreds or maybe thousands of Marines going to the bottom of the sea, it would have been the end of his presidency. So why risk it? In the end, I came to the conclusion that one plausible explanation and to my mind, maybe the most plausible explanation, was that Trump extricated Maduro from Venezuela in order to preempt a regime change that was coming from elsewhere, not from the Trump administration. And here's why I think that. Keep in mind that one of the organizations that's very, very active in South America is called Organization of American States, OAS. It's an international organization that works in conjunction with the United Nations, but it's not part of the United Nations. They just kind of work together. And then it partners with a whole lot of these World Health Organization and Facebook and Google and all kinds of military contractors. So it's a very, very extensive organization, but it works completely outside of the law. They have a legal immunity. Their premises are inviolable. Their archives are inviolable. They're completely, even though their headquarters in Washington, D.C., they're completely out of reach of the American law enforcement. Okay, park that thought. Organization of American States. In 2024, after the last elections in Venezuela, when Nicolas Maduro won, the G7 group of nations at one of their summits issued a statement saying that they do not consider Venezuelan elections legitimate, and they don't consider Nicolas Maduro the legitimate president of Venezuela. And they designated another person, which wasn't Juan Guaido, but I think it was a person whose name I forget now, who was the speaker of Venezuelan parliament at the time when Maduro declared himself to be the president of Venezuela. Okay. So already we see that a group of countries, and at the time, in 2024, the United States, as part of the G7, was signed off on this statement. There's no signatures, but, they're part of it. And it was under Biden. So it was the Blinken-Sullivan-Nuland administration. And so they already had their crosshairs on Nicolas Maduro. And then this whole nomination of Maria Corina Machado for Nobel Peace Prize is very suspect as well, because that didn't come from Donald Trump either. Where did it come from? So my take is that it probably came from some of these global international organizations, which could have been, World Economic Forum. It might have been the City of London, whatever. It's one of these. You remember going back to George Soros, two systems of governance. It's coming from this globalist neo-colonial system of governance, whatever the actual source of pressure was to designate Maria Corina Machado as Nobel Peace Prize recipient. And why would they do that? Well, kind of to anoint her as the next leader of Venezuela, because, that's already like a certain, how do you call it, reputational advantage over any other candidates. So I think that they were preparing some kind of a Venezuelan spring there. Okay. Kind of like what they triggered in Iran now. And it seems to me that the Trump administration, to not allow these forces to take a whole beachhead in their region, which would be Venezuela, they decided to do the move of getting Maduro out. So as far as everybody else, as far as the news cycle is concerned, we had a regime change. It's no longer Maduro, but leaving all the rest intact. So his handpicked successor, Delcy Rodriguez, forms the government. The military, the police, nothing else changes, not a thing. And so he kind of front ran them if they were going to orchestrate a regime change in Venezuela. And now he's working with that government. And then last point, Iran. That's another place where if you look at the news cycle, you get the impression that Trump is playing this evil game of waging war on Iran. He's going to regime change Iran and on and on and on. But none of that has happened. And about a week ago, I think it was Monday last week, I was on a podcast with Professor Glenn Deason, and we talked. He asked me about this, and I told him, look, he's not going to launch an attack on Iran. Everybody was saying that he was just about to bomb Iran, like in the next 12 to 24 hours. And I said, no, he's not going to do it. And the way I've been able to predict this, I mean, now people will say like, oh yeah, but it's because the Iranians neutralized Starlink, and then Saudis and Qatar and all of these countries denied airspace to American aircraft, so he couldn't, and on and on and on. Okay, fine. The outcome is he didn't bomb Iran. And then if you rewind the clock to June of last year, same thing. It was all building up. And on a few podcasts, I said, either he's not going to bomb Iran or he's going to do a fake war, meaning, some token missiles and bombs, a friendly handshake, a polite response, polite retaliation from Iran, saying, excuse me, terribly sorry, we're going to bomb your base in Qatar there. Please be sure to evacuate so there's no casualties. Thank you very much. And then the Iranians launch a retaliatory attack on that base. No casualties reported. And then Trump thanks the Iranians for the courtesy and says, we obliterated the nuclear program in Iran, right? Everybody knows that that's not true, but Trump for weeks is insisting on that word, obliterated the nuclear program. Why? The reason why is because that nuclear program was the West's justification for going to war against Iran. So if you obliterated the justification, no more reason to go to war against Iran. And so the whole thing died for the next 6 months. And then if we rewind the clock farther back to 2019, we remember that in June of 2019, the Iranians downed a drone in the Persian Gulf, an American drone. And then the pressure mounted on Trump to launch a war, to go to war against Iran, to launch a bombing raid. And Trump said no. So that was the third time pressure built on him to go to war against Iran. And the third time he kind of ditched it. But what was very indicative in 2019 is that after he said no, Anonymous leaked a whole bunch of cables between the British Embassy in Washington and the Foreign Office in London. And from those leaks, we were able to work out that it was the British Embassy who was leading the pack in lobbying the Trump administration to start bombing Iran. It was Ambassador Sir Kim Darroch who has been pushing a lot of these what he called Trump whisperers to influence Trump to order bombing of Iran. And then when he said no, Kim Darroch fired off a whole bunch of cables to London berating Trump, calling him incompetent and inept and unreliable and all these things. But he said, if we surround Trump, if we flood the zone around Trump with these Trump whisperers, that the next time Iran does anything unseemly in the region, that they will be able to tip Trump over the edge and launch that war. So the whole story tells us that it's the British who are again manipulating the United States into waging a dirty war, ultimately to the benefit of their Zionist project, which is Israel. and their own. And why does the Zionist project exist in the first place? It's because it's their beachhead to dominate the whole Middle Eastern region and its energy resources and its trade routes. You know, the Suez Canal, the future pipelines from Qatar over Syria and Iraq and Israel to Haifa, the plans that they had. And so in this past 12 months, Trump has pretty much demolished all of those plans. And all of them set Great Britain at a disadvantage. It's weakening their position. And there's also the question of Bosnia and Herzegovina in the Balkans. We're going to shorten that one, but basically, the British were rigging the region to create the second front in the conflict between West and Russia. And Trump pretty much went there, told them, get lost. There's a new sheriff in town. And since then, Bosnia and Herzegovina has been pacified. And I have this from a member of the cabinet of Republika Srpska firsthand. I asked him face to face. He explained all this to me. It seems that what Marco Rubio told to the Senate last January is exactly what the Trump administration is doing now. It's hard to read because it's extremely chaotic. Trump's own public statements, press releases are insane, but I think that they are deliberately insane because he just creates hysteria. And then when people latch on to the last dumb thing he said, he's already doing something else. Anyway, you know, you and I are both sitting in Europe. I'm inside of the EU. For me, his demolishing, we never mentioned Greenland, but that's a gambit to demolish NATO and EU. Him demolishing the NATO and the EU would be regarded as Liberation Day for most Europeans. So, you know, I can't help feeling cautiously optimistic. I do have to mention that what he's doing is so extremely risky that I am almost convinced, you know, he's acting very confident and very tough. But the likelihood of something going wrong is such that I can't help thinking that he must have been doing this in close cooperation and coordination with the Russians and with the Chinese. So that's the answer to that question.
The sponsor of today's episode is ARC Silver Gold Osmium. Owner Ian Everard is praised even by his competitors as one of the most honest and level-headed bullion dealers in the United States. They have some great prices. You can see some of them displayed right now on screen. Take advantage of these specials today by reaching out to Ian at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com. Make sure to tell him, of course, that Commodity Culture sent you. And now, back to the interview. Awesome. That was an epic presentation. You broke down a lot of that for us, so I appreciate that. I want to talk for a moment about the politicians and who's actually controlling them behind the scenes. I want to read a tweet from Elon Musk. He tweeted this recently. Most politicians are just the actors on the stage. You don't see the script writers, directors, and producers who control them. So the question is, who are the real people pulling the levers of power behind the scenes? There's a lot of different theories out there from secret societies such as the Freemasons. Some people say that once you get to the 33rd degree of the Freemasons, it's actually a Luciferian cult and that they are largely in control of these politicians. Some say the Frankists, another interesting cult that began, I believe, a few hundred years ago, where they believe they need to sin and destroy reality. It's a very bizarre religious belief, but supposedly a lot of the political elite of the time, and some people speculate that today it's the same, that they are the ones who are in control, or some just think Israel and the Zionist movement are behind it all. What is your view if you had to speculate on who are the people behind the scenes directing the politicians?
I think as through last many centuries of history, probably going back to the Greek antiquity, You have an oligarchy which consists of the leading banking families. So it's going to be people like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and Warburgs, and I don't know which other families you have in there. Bushes are probably smaller, how do you call it? Smaller fry, but it's going to be a hierarchical organizations of these families who are partners and rivals, but there's somebody at the top of the heap inevitably. And my understanding is that's the Rothschild family. And so below them, you're going to have the what you would call maybe like the Praetorian Guard, the intelligence assets primarily, and you're going to have the managerial class, people like Keir Starmer, Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, Emmanuel Macron, and so forth. And then they will control hierarchies of government bureaucracy to implement policies, but they're very limited in let's say democracies, if they're even partly effective, because you always have national laws and constitutions and some modicum of accountability. And so that's very difficult for them to navigate. So then they started creating after World War II, they started creating these international organizations. And so now there are 76 international organizations that have legal immunities in the United States under the International Organization Immunities Act of 1945, which means they're tax exempt, so they don't report taxes, so you can't have any look into their finances, money coming in, money going out. That's completely non-transparent. And they also have legal immunity, meaning you can't hold them accountable for anything. They work completely outside of the law. And so these international organizations, and when I say there's 76 of them, we're talking about things like the World Meteorological Organization, World Food Organization, World Health Organization, Gavi Vaccine Alliance, World like Migrations, something or other. And all these organizations, they're pretty much, when you look into their agendas and plans, they're pretty much, their objectives are to implement UN sustainable goals, the Agenda 2030, or, pretty much the same thing you can say is the Great Reset and the Klaus Schwab's Fourth Industrial Revolution. So they're all implementing that. And that's, when Klaus Schwab says that World Economic Forum is going to replace the United States as the global, the top of the global governance, this is what they mean. They intend to rule the world through all these immune, unaccountable, undemocratic international organizations. And when I was speaking about Nicolas Maduro, what happened just a few days after they brought Nicolas Maduro to the United States is that Trump administration announced that they were withdrawing from 66 out of 76 of these international organizations, which means they're yanking their legal immunities from under them. So that means that there's going to be accountability. And then also since you mentioned Elon Musk, he has a role in all this. A year ago, just before Trump was inaugurated, I don't know if you'll remember, but Elon Musk fired off a whole bunch of tweets targeting Keir Starmer's government and Gordon Brown about the grooming gangs scandal, which, the British establishment was kind of shoving it into the memory hole, and it was kind of dissipating from the public discourse until Elon Musk brought it back. And then if you dig into that whole morass, you understand why Keir Starmer is being so draconian in imposing censorship, in trying to kill X, in putting away everybody who tweets the wrong thing. More than 12,000 people a year arrested for tweets or Facebook posts or whatever, because this scandal is yet to blow up in their faces. So there was a massive cover-up. It's not just that thousands of British girls were systematically raped by these gangs of immigrants. Is that the money that they were making, and they were doing all kinds of crime that netted at least £8 billion. That money, in part, was used to fund terrorist organizations around the world. £80 million ended up funding Osama bin Laden at the time when he was already wanted by Western intelligence. And some of the people that were suspects in all this were connected with 7/7 bombings in the UK and 9/11 terror attacks in the United States. And so this was all spelled out in a report that was prepared for Elon Musk, I think late 2024 or early 2025. And then he had a pinned tweet for some time, which said, I have to read this out to you because it's, at the time I took it for trolling. Yeah, I took it as Elon Musk trolling the Brits, but it seems that it's far, far beyond that. So it was a poll, right? A Twitter poll. And the question was, quote, America should liberate the people of Britain from their tyrannical government. And it was pinned long enough that 2 million people responded, and 58% of them said yes. So I think that explains the absolutely hysterical, panicked behavior of the British government and their oppressiveness, which they don't even bother hiding anymore, and their endeavors to shut down X, to ban it from the European continent. And so that's a whole conflict between the United States and Europe, because the Europeans are still in this neo-imperialist, colonialist, oligarchic system of governance, which are now, closing ranks, because they're not just attacked by China and Russia. They're now being attacked by the United States as well. And on the other side, the United States is demanding freedom of speech for European people, and they're supporting sovereigntist parties like AfD, like Assemblée Nationale in France, Viktor Orban, and so on. And so that fight is ahead of us. And since your podcast is called Commodity Culture, I think we should also mention that this also hides maybe one of the trades of a lifetime, which is shorting European bonds, British gilts, the British pound, and the euro. I don't know when this will, because, markets are sometimes very slow to digest all these things. But once the critical mass of market participants decide We don't want to hold European bonds at these yields. It's going to have to be much, much higher. And we don't want to hold our money in Europe, and we don't want to hold our money in London. When investors start to act on those fears, we're going to have massive market dislocation. I think that British and European bonds are going to collapse, and I think that their currencies are going to follow. And then stock markets. This is in these types of crises, the stock markets tend to go vertical because everybody who wants to get rid of currency. They turn around, they say, I need to acquire real assets. What is it? And then, they plow liquidity into the stock market. Stock markets go vertical, but it doesn't help. It's not a hedge, because usually the collapse of the currency's purchasing power outpaces by far the gains in the stock market. So it's going to have to be gold, farmland, silver, Bitcoin, things like that. Not real estate, not stocks, definitely not bonds, unless you're going to short them.
Well, great summary there. Once again, we are running out of time, but really quick before I do let you go, do you think the bigger scandal in regards to the grooming gangs is not that they raised an incredible amount of money and used that to fund terrorism overseas, but that perhaps the British government and or MI6 could also be involved and cooperating in these scenarios? Is that a possibility in your view?
That's more than a possibility, Jesse. I will read to you. So I mentioned to you the report that was put together for Elon Musk, and so I'll read to you the recommendations. One of the recommendations of that report at the end, and it says, investigate state complicity in terrorism financing, whether UK government knowingly enabled VAT fraud proceeds to fund terrorism and protected those responsible for under the guise of national security. Among the conclusion, it also states this, quote, the UK government may have inadvertently or even purposefully become a key financial enabler of the 9/11 and 7/7 attacks. I mean, this is deadly serious stuff. The media won't touch it, but I guarantee you, in the halls of power in Washington, this is on the agenda. This is part of the whole spat between Trump administration and the Europeans and the Canadians and the money laundering centers. And I don't know how Maduro figures in all that equation, but I think that maybe the way he does is that these networks of power were going to regime change Venezuela in order to create a very hard to break beachhead in the Western Hemisphere, because Venezuela would be immensely complicated. It would be Vietnam to the third power for the United States. So that's my suspicion. Of course, I don't know that I'm right, but we're in a hailstorm of psyops and disinformation. And so, how you connect the dots is, it takes a lot of research and a lot of imagination. Anyway, that's my opinion. It's out there. And if I'm right, the bonds, the euro, the pound are going to get fried to a crisp.
Well, tell us about iSystem, Trend Compass, and anywhere else people can find your work online.
So thank you. I published a daily trend following market report called iSystem Trend Compass, which is available on Substack for less than $1 a day. And it covers 20 of the most important global markets. So it's going to be S&P 500 and US Treasury bonds and gilts and Euro bonds and FTSE, things like gold and Bitcoin. And that communicates daily the trend following signals for directional exposure to markets and the timing of trades. Then I also have a personal Substack, which is called Alex Krainer Substack, where I publish, articles on a broader range of topics, including history and psychology and geopolitics and all of this stuff. Not as frequently, but I try to make those articles a bit more refined and more extensively researched. And then I'm also quite active on X. My handle is @NakedHedgie. And basically, I just shoot my mouth off on X for fun and education.
Great. Well, I'll put links to all of that in the description below. Always a blast having you on the show, Alex, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Jesse. Always a pleasure. Thank you for the invite. Greetings to all your listeners and viewers, and until the next time, we'll know more about the world.
Thank you for joining us today. The sponsor of this episode, ARC Silver Gold Osmium, has some great prices on silver bullion products. They are on your screen right now. These are while supplies last and subject to change. So reach out to owner Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you, and pick up your Stack Silver Not Fiat t-shirt today, backed by a 100% quality guarantee, using the link in the description below. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.